Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dojo Live. Today is Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. This is Tulio Siragusa broadcasting from Southern California. Joining me today are Carlos Ponce from Cuernavaca, Mexico, and Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico. Hi, guys. Welcome back.
Hello.
Pleasure to be here, as ever, Tulio.
And of course, let's not forget why we do this, which is for our guest. And we have Christopher Berg, who's the CEO and head chef at Data Kitchen, broadcasting from just outside of Boston in Lexington, Massachusetts.
Happy to be
Welcome
here.
to the
Thanks
show, Christopher.
for welcoming, and glad that I learned that you lived in Watertown. So
Yes, I did for 3 years.
nice.
Pretty amazing place there. So it's great to have you with us today, and we're curious to learn what a head chef in a data company does. So we keep having this image of bits soup and bites. So before we go into the topic today and unpack everything that we can learn from that, let's get to know you a little bit, Christopher. Would you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Thank you.
Sure. So I guess what would I say? I'm an old data nerd. Maybe that's the headline. So I grew up in Wisconsin, worked my way through college. I actually taught in Africa in the Peace Corps for a few years. And then I spent 15 years kind of doing software. So I was a software engineer at a lab at NASA and also commercial at Microsoft. And then about 2005, I sort of thought I got this software thing, right? I can code, I can manage teams who code. I'm a big software guy. And I thought I'd do this data analytics thing. And I thought, it's easy, and I had small kids. I'll be able to go home at 5. There'll be no problems. And, it didn't turn out that way at all because I was managing teams of what we now call data engineers who put together data for insight, people who do visualization on top of that. Sometimes they're called analysts. And what we now call data scientists, people who apply algorithms to it. And, things broke left and right. And we never could go fast enough. And lo and behold, all the smart people I hired really wanted to innovate and do different things. And so, like running the factory, changing the factory was just hell for 7 or 8 years. And I had to really learn a whole new lessons on what it means to manage a technical team and what it means to actually build and truly be agile and truly run lean, in those words. And so when we founded the company 8 years ago, we realized that particular problem that we had with our groups was a generalizable problem to lots of people in the industry. And lots of people who are doing data and analytic work are suffering because they're sort of not operating with the right playbook. And so we have, I think, the right playbook and some software to back up the installation of that playbook. And so we have a company that's devoted to that.
Or a cookbook.
What an interesting journey. Interesting journey. You certainly were in the data space before we had access to parallel computing and all that came from that, which turned into big data and so on. So funny how data just doesn't render when you, the way you want it to, right?
Yeah. It's funny.
Especially when you have lots of it.
Yeah. So, and even when you have a little of it, it's got to it doesn't tell your story sometimes. It's wrong sometimes. And as a raw material, it has a lot of power, but like any raw material, it needs to be shaped into something. And those processes that you use to shape data, they've got two kind of interesting characteristics. One is day in and day out, it's kind of like a factory. It's kind of like building a Toyota car.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other, it's a lot like building software because the factory itself is software. So it has a lot of characteristics of what software teams do and how they work. And so this interesting mix of thinking of it as a factory and thinking of your team as a software team are two ideas that are, I think, now getting more and more popular in the data and analytics field. And I think that's sort of where we come in, because if you don't do that, you end up just your life sort of sucks, like mine did in 2006. And why it sucks is you're constantly feeling bad that you're going too slow, and teams, you're constantly having to deal with data problems. So you're kind of in hero mode. Like something goes wrong, your VP gets a report worked last week doesn't work this week. So it's 7 o'clock on Friday. You want to go home to your kid's party, but you're like tapping away, trying to figure out, did I get bad data? Did something happen? Did I misconfigure something? And there, teams of 24 people on the phone call who are sort of dreading going to work. And we actually did this survey recently of data engineers. It was kind of like a mental health survey. And we sort of asked them about job satisfaction and stress. And we threw this question in at the end that I thought would be, that we thought would kind of be a throw off, but it turned out to be really interesting. 80% of the people who are in the data engineering role want a therapist because their job is so unhappy and stressful. And I think that's a big, and
wow.
I live that life, so I understand it. It sucks, but I understand it.
Well, I mean, plus back then, I mean, you still had transition from mainframe system. All the data factories were transitioning from mainframe to cloud computing. I remember being with Axiom trying to introduce the whole concept of cloud computing when Netezza was just a starting company that had figured out how to create cloud. But in any case, data is always telling the truth, but it doesn't comply. It's a rebel. So let's get to know Data Kitchen.
Like
tell us a little bit about the company. Yes. Tell us about Data Kitchen.
Well, we tried out, when we started the company, we tried out names, and I didn't want to be another boring middle-aged white data guy, right? So I wanted something, because I am a boring middle-aged white data guy. So, I wanted something different. So we chose an interesting name, and kitchen's kind of appropriate because in a good restaurant, a kitchen is a very creative place, right? People, and they've got to do two things in that kitchen, right? One is they've got to, once they have a meal that people want to buy, they've got to consistently make it with high quality, right? And they've got to tweak it sometimes based on what the customers ask. Right. But then people go back to good restaurants, because they've always have new items that they're putting out. They also have new meals that they're trying off. So teams want to innovate, and it takes a team of people. It's not just one chef in a kitchen. Everyone's has to work together. They have different roles in that. So a kitchen is a very appropriate place to talk to the process that teams use to get insight out of data. And largely it's a team sport now. It's no longer the individual hero in the back room. It's it's a large groups of people. Dozens, if not hundreds of people are assigned to take the data that a company has, get more of it, and figure out if it matters to their business, and then answer questions from the business people and influence them with that data. And to me, that's the kitchen analogy is very apt, because it's that sort of creative, service-driven mentality that makes data and analytic teams excellent in my mind.
Excellent, I like it. Whether you get your data from the factory or the lake, it's got to end up in the kitchen.
It's got to happen in the kitchen. And we called data factory for a while. Maybe that's it, but it's more fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
All right, let's kick off the conversation with the topic today and see what we can unpack. Carlos, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tulio. Well, if you have, or anybody has ever wondered how data ops can lower the cost of asking analytic questions, well, that's something that we're going to be answering and discussing today right here on our show with our guest. And the topic for today's conversation, as chosen by Chris, our guest, is deliver better analytics faster with data ops. So the first question that I have for you, Chris, is why did you choose this particular topic for today's conversation, and why did you feel it was relevant for today's day and age?
Well, I'm going to start with a very interesting digression, right? And so when I grew up in Wisconsin, and there was an American Motors factory that produced this car called a Pacer, and it lasted like 50,000 miles. Sometimes you'd open the door, the people who worked on it left a wrench inside. It was a bad
ugliest car ever.
Yeah, like the worst car ever. And you know what? Sort of American Motors went out of business. And my dad was in a union at the time, right? He was a telephone repairman, and in high school, he got a Toyota Corolla. And it was a Japanese car. It was cheap. It lasted longer. And he's like, it's cheaper. It lasts longer. Why would I not buy it? And so, why did Toyota make better cars than American Motors? right? It's not that the people were better or the technology building cars is better. It's that Toyota really focused on the process of building things, right? They focused on that sort of the automation and the process of how those teams of people kind of building a technically complicated thing. And so there's a set of knowledge that sort of Deming and the Toyota production system figured out 50 years ago about, hey, you got a large bunch of people, they're working on a technically complicated thing like a factory. And how do you get them to work together? To not leave wrenches in cars and not have cars that break, right? To have cars that you can change quickly, to cars that have high quality. And in manufacturing, they call it TQM. And so about 20 years ago in software, and I'm sorry if I'm, that there's some people wrote something called the Agile Manifesto and said, you know what? Let's not be American Motors and software. Let's be Toyota. Let's produce high quality software that we can change a lot. And so I think what data ops is just stealing those same ideas. You know, what happened now, it's data and analytic teams, a bunch of people working on a shared technically complicated thing, that process to take data and put it in charts and graphs and insight. And the same sort of ways that you, the playbooks that you apply to factories, to software teams, need to apply to data and analytic teams. And we put the name on it as data ops, but it really is just a ripping off of old ideas and applying them to another domain.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris.
And that's what our company's about.
No,
That's totally great. Like we all need that type of eye-opening, like, hey, this works here, why not make it work in this space as well?
Yeah.
Is the term data ops, did you coin that out of Data Kitchen?
No, we had some worse names for it. Like we called it Agile Analytic Operations. We called it DevOps for data science. We called it analytic ops, but then if you shorten it to a smaller word, it creates something that's not quite so good. And so we found one article that was using the term data ops, and we started to use it. So it was short.
That's the one we're going with. Excellent.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned about. I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Tulio, please.
No, go ahead. Cool.
I was just going to say something that grabbed my attention here as I was looking at the website, and it's about how you mentioned that teams can stop worrying about everything that they went wrong and start winning respect and appreciation for everything that goes right.
Yeah.
So I've spoken to a lot of software developers out there who are great, but they will claim this particular skill as their own, but no, they need help, right? They could need help, and that's where data ops comes in and Data Kitchen comes in, right?
Yeah, yeah, and we target people who don't do software but do data and analytics, and they're kind of like software engineers. They look like them, they talk like them, they watch the same movies, but somewhere after college they took the right turn and they're data people now, not software people, even though they may have a CS degree and they code all the time. So you don't want to mix up a data person with a software person. They get, even though it's hard to tell. Yeah, it's fighting words.
Exactly. All right.
Yeah, and I think and that's who we want to help, the data teams, data and analytics.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris.
Let's unpack this a little bit. How does it help those teams? What is it exactly that Data Kitchen is providing? Perhaps just painting the picture. Not everyone's fully aware of everything inside of the data flow ecosystem, right? If we paint the picture from the repository, the source of the data, how it gets extrapolated into some kind of a place to massage it, analyze it, enhance it, and then produce some insights that can execute some other systems that make decisions. If you can just unpack, where does this fit in the ecosystem of the entire data flow?
So like we think of it as the factory and not the workstation on a particular step in the factory. We think it as a system that helps automate workflows as opposed to analyzing data. And so it becomes the system of record for the code that is applied to data to get insight, as opposed to the system of record for data. Because one way to shake, data people tend to be very data focused, but they're building software. And maybe that software is Python code, or maybe that software is built in a nice UI and runs in a nice engine. It's an ETL tool and runs in that engine, or you're configuring something. But fundamentally, those tools that you mentioned, think of those as the workstations that data is going through. Data is being accessed, integrated. Algorithms are being applied, visualizations being applied, security, governance. There's all these different kind of workstations that are putting pieces together on the data, and artifacts are being created. And there's no factory that registers all those pieces now. It's people sort of throw stuff from one level to the other, like, hey, I'm done. And then they check it over, and, people are maybe there to catch it or not. And the data's done. All right, you do your model. All right, the model's done. All right, you do your viz. And the viz is done. Well, we got to do the governance and security. And it's so manual and unautomated. And it's very craft production. And to use a manufacturing term, and it's not automated, it's not assembled, it's not analyzed for improvement. And that sort of idea of you should focus on the factory as opposed to just the individual workstations in the factory, and looking at it from an end-to-end process as opposed to a largely bunch of disjoint processes. That's a fairly lean, agile, Deming-like idea, right? Is to think in systems. As opposed to particular. So we're a system that helps people deliver insight using their current tools, using their current data, faster with higher quality, and gives them more time to add value to their business instead of spending times in meetings and doing the same thing 13 times over again.
And add value to their lives, like you were mentioning before, right? So this is this hope of, if you like data, it doesn't have to be miserable. Do you have any stories of numbers, data, as how efficient or how much a tool like Data Kitchen can help this process and the real life impact on the actual analysts?
Yeah, we do, and it's really amazing, and it may sound insane, but companies end up delivering 10 times more insight. They do 10 times more appreciable work when they have a process that works. And why is that crazy number? It's because there's a lot of impedance and slowness in trying to, when you sort of take stuff, hand create it, throw it over to the next person, hand create it. There's meetings and coordination, and there's a lot of problems in that errors that trap, and the errors are time consuming. And so, big statistics about all data and analytic projects are that 60 to 80% of them fail in some form. This is Gartner. It's a number. They fail to get their requirements. They fail to meet it. There's a group called New Vantage Partners that does a survey of chief data officers, and the sort of high order bit in data and analytics is being data driven. That's what Gartner says. You want your company to be data driven. And the number of companies self-reporting being data driven has gone down by 4 percentage points in the latest survey. And so this project failure, the number of data drivens going down, our psychological survey about frustrations. We've done surveys about error rates, how many errors people have, and a lot of their work is sort of fraught with errors and people following it up. And all these things just point to an industry that, you could say is in trouble, or I think of it as it's an opportunity to change and improve. Mm-hmm. And we've got to get out of the heroic age, or we've also got to get out of the, if I build it, I'm never going to change it because I'm afraid it's going to break phase. So there's a lot of heroism, and then there's a lot of sort of its counterpart, which is sort of fear and off-putting and wall building.
Hey, Chris, a little parenthesis here. We got folks internally here saying that, hey, they love your hairy friend laying there, so peace and quiet.
Oh, yeah. It's my dog. Yeah, he comes up in the afternoon, hangs out. It's his time. So yeah, it's my wife's labradoodle. So
yeah,
excellent.
Hey,
there he is.
Oh, are you guys talking about me?
What's going on?
What you talking about, Willis? Okay.
There we go.
So Chris, you and I mean, we're old enough to remember the impact middleware had on data back in the day. I mean, that was the biggest probably breakthrough in analytics in terms of being able to orchestrate the various systems, which were not as many as they are today, but the middleware made it possible to orchestrate and facilitate all this analytics, even though it was still very manual to a lot of it. But would you move fast forward, big data, cloud computing, it changed everything, right? There's so much more information. There's really no such middleware orchestration engine, although it sounds a little bit like what you guys are doing mimic some of that. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, a little bit. I think what we're trying to do is, we're trying to orchestrate processes, and the processes are with the people and the tools that they use to do their job, and less about the sort of data flow in the organization, moving the data from one place to the other. Because with the movement to cloud, or with, tools like SnapLogic or MQ series or ETL tools, the sort of flow of data problem has been worked on and kind of solved. And people, they have a lot of data, and they're increasingly, the tools are getting commoditized to get access to that data. What they don't have is the ability to kind of synthesize the data. And that process of synthesizing data and building the factory to support a good result out of that synthesis is what's hard for people. And fundamentally, I think data and analytics is a service profession. You're trying to help. You're trying to help the business or the customer get value out of data, and you have these particular set of skills that you've learned in analyzing data that make you a good technical person, and you're trying to convince them and be of service to them. And that's really best done in an iterative process, and it actually makes really good job satisfaction, because once you start having effect on your customers, it's really empowering the teams. And instead of spending 6 months working on something, you're delivering something every 2 weeks. I find the teams who do it, they're just much happier, and they're much more empowered, and they're less likely to quit and walk away, which is another problem. And so I think that is really my ultimate motive in starting the company, is just removing the lack of job satisfaction that I felt in 2006 and 7, and allowing people to organize properly so that they can deliver value quickly, be of service to the organization, and take our weird particular nerd data skills and make them useful for the company.
So just to continue on this topic, consulting firms have made millions of dollars helping organizations plan out the orchestration of what you're talking about. Is this to complement that, or is this codifying what usually has taken lots and lots of consultants to come up with workflows to develop these strategies? Is this a replacement for that, so that it's more automated and more self-service oriented, or does it work in conjunction with those experts who could come in to help build those workflows? Curious the contrast between the two.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in the data and analytic field, one way people solve analytics is they have an internal team whose job it is to deliver insight from data. Another way they do it is they say that internal team sucks. We're going to hire McKinsey or a bunch of, there's hundreds of consultancies who are basically, give us your data. Our people are so smart. We're going to turn back insight. And in fact, I worked for one of those for a while. And, it's great. But like what I learned is that and this may sound really arrogant, but most people aren't that smart. And consultants are selling smarts, but really what matters isn't smart. It's the system people work in. And, consulting's got a, up and out metaphor. So people work like crazy in long hours. But I don't think that has to be the only way you get insight out of data. I think you can build a system that produces lots of new and original insight and not have your team be killed, and therefore not have to hire out consultants whose sort of business model is hiring 22-year-olds, burning them out, and then hiring a new crop of 22-year-olds. Not to say that that's wrong, and not to say that the consultants aren't great people. I'm just thinking from my mind, in that particular case of getting insight out of data, you can institutionalize best practice, and your internal team can do it. And it's not so much while smart people are nice and important, I'm less of a believer that smart people really matter, and systems that people work in matter more.
Mhm.
And it's a very Deming-esque idea.
Well, I mean, it goes back to
Chris.
this idea of the Agile Manifesto. One is you empower people to do it themselves. The other one is you're codependent on some external consultant to help you through it. So totally appreciate the comparison. Go ahead, Carlos.
Thank you, Tulio. Appreciate it. Chris, okay. Assuming we got a lot of engineers watching out there, watching the show, the conversation, and let's suppose that you want to reel in only the best of the best to come work for you. What would you tell them that would make them drop it, whatever it is that they're doing, come work for you and apply for a job at Data Kitchen? What makes Data Kitchen a great company that people might want to come work for?
My pitch to our candidates is that we're helping people who are like you. You may be a software engineer or you may be a data engineer, but they're fundamentally nerds like you, and they're suffering. And we have the formula to ease that suffering, right? And it's proven through our company, and it's proven because we're ripping off previous people who solved the same problem in different industries.
Mhm.
And then second, they like the fact that my company is profitable. We're bootstrapped. We've never got any outside funding. We're 65 people now. And, I wrote the first version of the product. So they like working for a person who's technical. And
Wow.
so, and those two things, I think, you really have a chance to truly help people. And I don't mean that just in the blow smoke phase.
Mhm.
And, you're working for a fellow nerd who kind of gets it and has done your job. And so those things, I think, are good messages to engineers who want to come work for us. Maybe we're not the sexiest job and the cool company that's got 400 million in financing, and everyone gets a lot of free stuff, but we're profitable, and we're and we're growing. So
Yeah, I like the fact that the way you put it, like you yourself as an engineer, I mean, you feel their pain and they feel yours, right?
yeah. So I mean, that's what's nice about being an old nerd, is like I've done every job in a software company, right? And recently, right? And so it's okay. Like I get what they're doing, and so that
Right.
they and my co-founders are too, so they can't put one over on us, which is also
Right.
not a negative. We can tell how long it's going to take.
Right.
But we've
Excellent.
also set up our company following our belief system, right? That
Mhm.
autonomy and mastery and purpose are a great way to do a job. And that, working an agile way and focusing on customer value. And sometimes your customer is not the end customer, but your fellow employee.
Right.
And so we have, we don't have a huge company, right? So I do training of new employees, and I went through cultural values. And yeah, I think that stuff matters because at least as a guy who founded a company, I'm trying to make a company that I wanted to work at, and
Nice.
I'm old enough that I don't have anybody else to impress. And so I'm just trying to make a great workplace.
Excellent. Rings a
Very
bell.
nice.
Rings a bell. Excellent. Back to you guys.
So we're almost up on time. In fact, we are up on time. But I just wanted to ask for anyone who's watching, maybe one or two or three key things that would trigger them wanting to contact you. What's going on in their organization that should be the red flag that says, you know what, I really ought to go talk to Data Kitchen? What do they need to look out for?
Exactly. And this is the way we think of it. Are you producing data insights that have a lot of problems with them? Are you spending Friday or Saturday fixing things that should work? And do you have the Monday morning dread? You wake up for that email saying it's wrong and my life's going to suck for the next week. And then number two is you go into your business customer and you do a great job, and they ask 10 follow-up questions, and your heart sinks because it's going to take you a month to do those 10 follow-up questions, and their expectations are you should be able to do that in a few days. And so those two things, you can't go fast enough and things are breaking, are really good causes. And then the third thing is somewhere along the line, you've learned that how you organize your teams, maybe because you've got an agile background or a DevOps background, or maybe you've worked in manufacturing, that organization of teams and systems and automation matter, and not just like magic beans of I'm going to buy a new, faster database. And so those things tend to be good characteristics for us.
Great. Thank you. We appreciate having you as our guest. Lots to do when it comes to managing data and getting better insights, but you can go to the kitchen and get your information in the best way possible. So check out Data Kitchen. Thanks for being with us. Just stay with us as we go off the air in just a minute. Carlos, we got one more show tomorrow, right? What do we got coming up?
Yeah, absolutely, Tulio. Thank you. And of course, thanks, Chris, for being with us. So today we got, tomorrow, I'm sorry, we have the final show of the week. We'll be speaking with Mark Ruddock, the CEO of Nuula. The topic will be the intersection of data and design, reimagining small business financial services. That's what we have tomorrow right here on Dojo Live at 12 p.m. Pacific. So remember, everyone, join us. Don't miss it. And you make it a grand day. Have fun. Exactly. Yeah, enough of staying safe. So
do that
too.
too.
Stay safe, but have fun.
Do that too, but also have fun. Don't forget to have fun. You only live once. Thank you.